The human fleet came out of hyperspace and entered the biggest space station in the galaxy. Admiral Tae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, the Dauntless, and looked through the large window at what waited for them. He had seen pictures, he had read reports, but nothing had prepared him for this. Orion Station was a city floating in space. It was so big that it made planets look small. Around it, thousands of alien ships moved like fish in a dark ocean. Some ships were made of crystal that glowed with strange light. Others were black as night and shaped like giant arrows. A few ships were not made of metal at all. They were alive. They breathed. They moved like sleeping animals. And then there was the human fleet. 12 ships. Just 12. Lieutenant Hannah Park stood next to the admiral. She was young, but her eyes were sharp, and her mind was sharper. She looked at the alien ships and did some quick math in her head. The enemy had more than 2,000 vessels. Each one was at least 10 times bigger than any human ship. "Sir," she said quietly, "they are not taking us seriously." Tae-ho nodded. He could already hear it. The communication channels were open, and the aliens were not even trying to hide their amusement. Laughter. Deep, rolling laughter that came from a dozen different species. The Velthari were the first to speak. Their ambassador appeared on the main screen. He was tall, maybe 7 feet, and his body was covered in scales that shimmered like diamonds. His mouth was wide, and when he smiled, it was not a kind smile. "So this is the mighty human fleet," the ambassador said. His voice was smooth like oil. "We expected something more. Impressive. Are these all your ships? Or are the rest hiding somewhere?" More laughter came through the speakers. Other alien commanders were watching. They were all enjoying the show. Tae-ho said nothing. His face was calm like still water. On another ship, the Iron Phoenix, Captain Seok-yoon watched the same scene on his own screen. He was an older man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. He had fought in wars before. He knew what fear looked like, and he knew that the aliens felt none of it. "Not yet. Let them laugh," Sok said over the private channel that connected all human ships. "They see 12 small vessels. They do not see what is inside them." Commander Nari Baek was listening from the engineering deck of the Dauntless. She was the smartest person in the fleet when it came to machines and power. Right now, she was looking at her instruments with a small smile on her face. The aliens measured strength in simple ways. They looked at size. They looked at mass. They counted how much energy a ship's reactor could produce. By those numbers, humanity was nothing. A bug, a joke, but Nari knew something the aliens did not. Humans did not measure strength the same way. Back on the bridge, the Velthari ambassador was still talking. "We have called this meeting to give you a choice," he said. "Your kind has built a colony in the Kepler Expanse. This is unacceptable. The Kepler Expanse belongs to the Galactic Coalition. Your colony sits on resources that are not yours to take." Tae-ho finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. 30,000 people live in that colony. Families, children, we will not abandon them. The ambassador tilted his head. For a moment, something like pity crossed his face. "Then you have chosen death. Our fleet will erase your colony from existence. Your 12 ships cannot stop us." A child could see this. A Korvax warlord appeared on the screen next to the Velthari. The Korvax were warriors by nature. Their skin was dark red, and their eyes burned like coals. This one had tusks that curved up from his lower jaw. "Go home, little humans," the warlord growled. "Go home before you embarrass yourselves. This is not your war to fight. This is not your place to stand." Lieutenant Hannah gripped the edge of her console. Her knuckles turned white. She wanted to say something. She wanted to tell these aliens that humans had faced worse odds before, that her ancestors had fought armies with nothing but farming tools, that her people had walked through fire and ice and come out the other side, but she stayed silent. The admiral had not given her permission to speak. Tae-ho looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He smiled. "We are not going home," he said simply. "And we are not leaving our people behind. If you want the Kepler Expanse, You will have to take it from us." The aliens laughed again. But this time, a few of them stopped sooner than the others. Something in the human admiral's eyes made them uncomfortable. There was no fear there. No desperation. Just calm certainty. Deep in the belly of the Dauntless, Chief Engineer Do-Hun Lee was working. His hands moved over controls that the aliens had never seen. The Prometheus cores were coming online. These machines were humanity's secret. They were the reason 12 ships had come to face 2,000. Do-Hun wiped sweat from his forehead and spoke into his communicator. "Admiral, the cores are ready. All 12 ships are linked. We can begin whenever you give the order." Taeho heard the message through his earpiece. He did not react. He just kept looking at the alien ambassador. "You have 1 day to leave this system," the Velthari said. "After that, we will show no mercy." The screen went dark. Hana let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "Sir, what do we do now?" Taeho turned away from the window. Outside, the alien fleet stretched across the stars like a wall of death. 2,000 ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that could crack planets in half, and 12 human vessels. "Now," the Admiral said, "we show them why they should not have laughed." The Galactic Coalition had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had seen many species rise and fall. They had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and divided the galaxy among themselves like pieces of a cake. Humans were new. They had only left their home planet 200 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies taking their first steps. And now these babies had built a colony on land the Coalition wanted. Diplomatic Officer Yuna Choi stood in the Great Hall of Orion Station. The room was so large that clouds formed near the ceiling. 12 different species sat in a circle around her, their representatives towering over the single human woman. She was not afraid. Yuna had grown up in a small village where winter lasted 8 months of the year. She had learned to survive before she learned to walk. She had fought for everything she had. A room full of aliens was not going to make her kneel. "The Kepler expanse was unclaimed territory," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "We followed every law. We filed every document. Our colony is legal." The Velthari High Arbiter leaned forward. He was older than the ambassador, and his scales had faded to a pale silver. But his eyes were just as cold. "Legal?" he repeated. "You speak of laws that we wrote. Laws that we can change whenever we wish. The Kepler expanse has neutronium, the most valuable resource in the galaxy. You think we will let a young species like yours control it?" Yuna did not blink. "We are not giving up our colony. Then your colony will burn." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around the room, the other species nodded in agreement. The Korvax, the Miran, the Dorathi. All of them wanted the humans gone. All of them saw an easy target. Back on the Dauntless, Admiral Taeho watched the meeting through a hidden camera in Yuna's brooch. His hands were folded behind his back, but his mind was racing. "They will attack," Commander Nari said. She was standing beside him, her tablet showing fleet positions. "Probably within 12 hours. They want this over quickly." "They think it will be quick," Taeho replied. "They are wrong." Captain Sock's voice came through the communication channel. "All ships are in position. The crews are ready." "But Admiral, I must ask you one more time. Are you sure about this plan? If it fails, we all die." Taeho was quiet for a moment. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 7 years old. She had his eyes and her mother's smile. She had asked him not to go to war. He had promised her he would come back. "The plan will not fail," he said. "Humans have fought against impossible odds before. We always find a way." In the Great Hall, the meeting was ending. The High Arbiter stood up, and his voice echoed through the chamber. "You have until sunrise on your colony world. After that, we will send our fleet. Your 12 ships will be destroyed. Your colony will be erased. And the galaxy will forget that humans ever existed." Yuna wanted to laugh. She wanted to tell this ancient creature that humans had a talent for survival, that they had lived through ice ages, plagues, and wars that killed millions, that they had split the atom and walked on moons and refused to die even when the universe itself seemed to want them gone. But she kept her face calm. "We will not forget," she said. "And neither will you." She turned and walked out of the hall. The aliens watched her go, already dismissing her from their minds. They should have paid more attention. On the Dauntless, Chief Engineer Do-hun was explaining the Prometheus cores to a group of young officers. They needed to understand what they were about to use. "Normal ships use reactors that burn fuel," he said. "Bigger reactor, bigger ship, more power. Simple. The aliens understand this. Their whole way of thinking is based on it." He pointed to a diagram on the screen. It showed 12 small objects connected by glowing lines. The Prometheus cores are different. They do not make power. They share it. All 12 of our ships are linked together. When one ship fires a weapon, it draws power from all 12 cores at once. When one ship raises its shields, all ships help to strengthen it. A young officer raised her hand. "So we fight as one?" Do-hun smiled. "Better than that. We think as one. Our computers talk to each other faster than any alien system. We move together. We strike together. 12 ships, one mind." Navigator Ji-woo Han was in her own chamber, preparing for what came next. She was responsible for the drones. Thousands of them. Each one was small enough to fit in her hand, but together, they were a storm of metal and fire. The aliens had never seen drone warfare at this scale. They had never needed it. Their ships were big enough to carry armies. They fought with brute force and overwhelming numbers. Humans fought differently. Ji-woo closed her eyes and connected her mind to the drone network. She could feel each one like a finger on her hand. She could move them with a thought. She could see through their sensors and fire their weapons. In the old days, human generals had commanded soldiers from far away, moving pieces on a map. Ji-woo was doing the same thing. But her pieces numbered in the thousands, and they moved at the speed of light. Night fell on Orion Station. The alien fleet began to move, forming into attack groups. The Velthari took the center, their crystal ships glowing like stars. The Korvax took the flanks, their black dreadnoughts hungry for blood. The Miron held the rear, their living ships pulsing with strange life. 2,000 ships, more firepower than humanity had ever faced. And in the middle of all of this, 12 human vessels waited in silence. Lieutenant Hana looked at her console. The numbers were clear. The odds were clear. By every calculation, they should run. They should surrender. They should do anything but fight. But she thought about the 30,000 people on Kepler-7, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, people who had left everything behind to build a new life among the stars. They were counting on this fleet, on these 12 ships, on her. "Hana," Admiral Taeho said quietly, "are you ready?" She looked up at him. Her fear was there, but it was small now. Something stronger had taken its place. "Yes, sir," she said. "I am ready." Taeho nodded. He opened a channel to all 12 ships, to the thousands of crew members who had volunteered for this mission, to the men and women who had chosen to stand against an empire. "This is Admiral Kim," he said. "The enemy is coming. They think we are weak. They think we are afraid. They think this will be easy." He paused, and his voice grew hard as steel. "Let us teach them otherwise." The coalition fleet moved toward Kepler-7 like a wave of darkness. 2,000 ships crossed the empty space between stars, their engines burning bright against the black void. They were in no hurry. They had no reason to rush. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Admiral Taeho watched them come. His fleet had taken position near the colony world, forming a thin line between the enemy and the planet below. 30,000 innocent lives were behind him. Millions of tons of alien metal were in front of him. "Distance?" he asked. "They will be in weapon range in 15 minutes, Lieutenant Hana reported. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. Taeho noticed. He said nothing. Fear was natural. What mattered was what you did with it. On the Iron Phoenix, Captain Siok was giving his crew a final speech. His words were simple. He told them that they were about to make history, that their children and grandchildren would tell stories about this day, that no matter what happened, they would not be forgotten. Then he told them to get to their stations and prepare for hell. Deep in the Dauntless, Navigator Jiwoo Han sat in a special chair surrounded by screens. Wires connected her helmet to the ship's main computer. Through these wires, she could feel the drones sleeping in the cargo bays of all 12 ships, 20,000 drones. Each one was the size of a large bird. Each one carried a small but powerful weapon. And each one was connected to Jiwoo's mind. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. "Admiral," she said through the communication channel, "the swarm is ready." Taeho nodded even though she could not see him. "Hold until my command." The minutes passed slowly. The alien fleet grew larger and larger on the screens. The Velthari crystal ships caught the light of distant stars and scattered it like broken glass. The Korvax dreadnoughts absorbed the light and gave nothing back. The Miran biocruisers moved in strange, organic patterns, their hulls breathing like living creatures. 10 minutes. Commander Nari checked the Prometheus cores one last time. The 12 ships were perfectly synchronized. Power flowed between them like blood through a body. They were ready. 5 minutes. The alien fleet slowed down. They were savoring this moment. The Velthari High Arbiter appeared on the human communication screens. His silver scales glittered with cruel amusement. "Last chance, humans," he said. "Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick. Your colony will still burn, but you can die with honor." Admiral Taeho looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he spoke one word: deploy. What happened next would be remembered for 1,000 years. From the sides of all 12 human ships, thousands of small objects shot into space. They moved so fast that alien sensors could barely track them. They spread out in patterns that seemed random but were carefully calculated. They swarmed toward the enemy fleet like angry bees. The Velthari did not understand what they were seeing. "What is this?" the High Arbiter demanded. "Are those missiles? Shoot them down." The alien ships tried. They fired their weapons at the small objects. But the objects were too fast. They dodged and weaved and spun through the laser fire like dancers in a storm. And then they started to fight back. Navigator Jiwoo felt each drone as part of herself. She moved them with thoughts, not commands. Left, right, up, down, attack, evade. She did not have to think about it. It was like breathing. It was like walking. The first Korvax dreadnought exploded before its crew understood they were dying. 20 drones had found a weak point in its shields. 20 small weapons had fired at exactly the same spot, at exactly the same moment. The combined power had punched through the armor like a needle through paper. The ship came apart in a ball of fire. "One down, weapons officer," Hyun Kang said. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. 1,999 to go. More explosions lit up the darkness. The drones were everywhere now, swarming around the alien ships like mosquitoes around sleeping giants. The aliens fired back, but their weapons were designed to hit big targets. They could not track things so small and so fast. On the Velthari flagship, alarms were screaming. Officers shouted orders that made no sense. The High Arbiter stared at the tactical display, unable to believe what he was seeing. His fleet was being torn apart by insects. "Fall back," he ordered. "Reform the line. Concentrate fire." But falling back meant giving up space. Reforming meant confusion. And concentrating fire meant leaving other areas undefended. Jiwoo saw the patterns changing. She adjusted her drones instantly, sending them toward the gaps the aliens were creating. More ships died. A Miran biocruiser split open like rotting fruit. A Velthari crystal ship shattered into 1,000,000 glittering pieces. On the Dauntless, Lieutenant Hana was counting kills. 200 ships destroyed, she reported. 300. 400. The alien fleet was in chaos. They had never faced an enemy like this. They had never needed to. For 10,000 years, they had crushed every opponent with superior size and firepower. They had forgotten what it meant to fight something they could not understand. But humans remembered. Humans had spent their entire history fighting against things bigger and stronger than themselves. They had killed mammoths with pointed sticks. They had conquered oceans with wooden boats. They had reached the stars with metal tubes and controlled explosions. They had evolved to be problem solvers, hunters, survivors. And now the galaxy was learning what that meant. The battle raged for 3 hours. The alien fleet tried everything. They clustered together for protection. But that just made them easier targets. They spread out to avoid the drones, but that left individual ships alone and vulnerable. They tried to retreat, but the drones followed them. By the time the surviving ships finally managed to create some distance, nearly half of the coalition fleet was gone. 1,000 ships, reduced to floating wreckage and cooling bodies. Admiral Tejo watched the enemy retreat. His face showed no joy. War was not a thing to celebrate. "How many drones did we lose?" he asked. "About 6,000, Jiwoo replied. She sounded tired. Controlling 20,000 machines with her mind had drained her completely. "And our ships?" Commander Nari answered this one. "All 12 are still flying. Minor damage only." The Prometheus cores held. Tejo nodded slowly. They had won the first round, but he knew the aliens would not give up. They would come back with new tactics, new strategies, new weapons. This was not over. On the broken remains of the coalition fleet, the Velthari High Arbiter stared at the reports with hollow eyes. 1,000 ships, gone, against 12 human vessels. "How?" he whispered to no one. "How is this possible?" No one answered him. No one knew, but deep in his ancient heart, a feeling he had not experienced in centuries began to grow. Fear. The coalition fleet regrouped at the edge of the Kepler system. 1,000 ships remained from the original 2,000. Their crews were shaken, confused, and afraid. The laughter had died. The confidence had crumbled. Now there was only silence and the memory of burning vessels. The Velthari High Arbiter called a meeting of all surviving commanders. Their holographic images appeared in his war room, each one showing signs of stress and damage. "We underestimated them," the Arbiter admitted. It hurt to say the words. "We will not make that mistake again." The Korvax warlord growled deep in his chest. "Their tiny machines are fast, but they are not infinite. We lost half our fleet because we were not ready. Now, we are ready. We raise our shields to maximum. We stay close together. We burn anything that comes near us." A Murin hive mother spoke next. Her voice was wet and bubbling. "My biocruisers have adapted. They can see the small machines now. They can eat them from the air." The Arbiter nodded. "Good. We will advance again. This time, we will be a wall of fire that nothing can pass through. Their drones will break against our combined shields, and then we will crush their 12 little ships like the insects they are." The commanders agreed. The fleet reformed into a tight formation, each ship protecting the others. Their shields overlapped, creating layers of protection. Their weapons pointed outward in all directions, ready to destroy anything that moved. They began to advance again. On the Dauntless, Admiral Tejo watched the enemy approach. He could see what they were doing. It was smart. It would work against the drones, but humans never relied on just one strategy. "They adapted faster than I expected," he said calmly. "Navigator Jiwoo, how many drones do we have left?" Jiwoo was resting in her chair, her mind still recovering from the earlier battle. 14,000. "Sir. But if they keep their shields linked like that, the drones cannot break through. Then we do not use drones." He opened a channel to the Hammer of Soul. Captain Bora Shin appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 40s, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. "Captain Shin," Tejo said, "wake up the ghosts." Bora smiled. It was not a kind smile. "With pleasure, Admiral." Deep inside the 12 human carriers, something else waited. Not drones this time. Something the aliens had not seen. Something that moved through space without being detected. The Spectres. There were only 50 of them. Each one was a small ship, barely bigger than a shuttle. Their hulls were covered with special material that bent light around them. They did not appear on sensors. They did not reflect radar. They were invisible, and they carried boarding parties. Marine Commander Quan O sat in the lead Spectre, checking his weapon for the 10th time. His team of 40 soldiers waited with him. They were not normal soldiers. They were the best humanity had. Each one had been trained since childhood. Each one had survived tests that killed weaker candidates. They were hunters. "Remember," Quan said to his team, "we are not here to fight. We are here to break their brains. Suji will handle the computers. The rest of us keep her alive." Engineer Suji Lim nodded from her seat. She was small and thin, with glasses and nervous hands. She looked like a librarian, not a warrior. But her mind was the most dangerous weapon on the ship. Suji was a hacker, the best humanity had ever produced. Given enough time, she could break into any system, crack any code, control any machine. And she was about to prove it. The Spectres launched from the carriers and disappeared into the darkness. The drone swarm went out again at the same time. Not to attack, but to distract. The aliens focused on the drones, pouring fire into the small machines that danced around their shields. They did not notice the invisible ship slipping past. Quan's Spectre approached the Velthari flagship. It was enormous, a mountain of crystal and metal. 100,000 crew members lived inside it, and somewhere in its heart was the central command computer that controlled half the coalition fleet. "Breach point located," his pilot reported. "Maintenance hatch on the lower hull. Minimal security. Take us in." The Spectre attached to the flagship like a tick on a dog. A special drill cut through the hull in seconds. The human team poured into the alien ship. What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. The Velthari were tall and elegant. They moved with grace and confidence. They had ruled the stars for millennia, but they had never been hunted. Humans had. For millions of years, humans had been prey on a dangerous world. They had learned to move quietly, to strike from shadows, to work together in small groups against larger enemies. They had developed fear and adrenaline, and the terrible creativity that comes from being afraid. Quan's team moved through the ship like water through cracks. They avoided major corridors. They crawled through vents. They used the ship's own structure against its crew. When they encountered guards, the fights were short and brutal. The Velthari were bigger and stronger, but they were slow. They expected enemies to face them directly. They did not expect grenades from above or bullets from behind or blades across their throats before they could turn around. Suji reached the main computer chamber in 15 minutes. Quan and his remaining soldiers held the door while she worked. Her fingers danced over alien controls. Codes fell before her like walls of sand. Security systems that had taken centuries to build crumbled in moments. "I am in," she said. Her voice was quiet but triumphant. "I have access to their fleet coordination network." "Do it," Quan ordered. Suji pressed a button. Outside, the coalition fleet began to die. Navigation systems failed. Ships that had been flying in formation suddenly veered off course, crashing into each other. Weapons that had been pointing outward now turned inward. Shields flickered and dropped. The Miran biocruisers received false signals that told them enemies were inside their own hulls. They began to attack themselves, their organic weapons tearing through their own flesh. The Korvax dreadnoughts lost all communication. Each ship was suddenly alone, unable to talk to its neighbors. They panicked. They fired at anything that moved. Sometimes that meant firing at their allies. In 10 minutes, the tight formation that had protected the coalition fleet became a killing field of confusion and friendly fire. Admiral Tejo watched it happen. "Now," he said, "all ships, advance. Navigator Jiwoo, release the drones." The 14,000 remaining drones swarmed forward. But this time, they did not face a wall of shields and fire. They faced chaos. Broken ships, confused crews, enemies that did not know which way to shoot. The slaughter was complete. On the Velthari flagship, alarms screamed in every corridor. The High Arbiter stood on his bridge, watching his empire crumble around him. How? He demanded. How are they doing this? A junior officer looked up from his console with terror in his eyes. Sir, there are aliens aboard. Humans. They have taken control of our systems. The Arbiter could not believe it. Humans were inside his ship. His ship. The greatest vessel in the Coalition fleet. He reached for his weapon. But by then, it was already too late. Quan's team had finished their mission. The Spectres picked them up and vanished back into the darkness. They left behind a crippled fleet and a broken commander who would never laugh at humans again. In 3 hours, the Battle of Kepler 7 was over. Of 2,000 Coalition ships, fewer than 300 escaped. The human fleet had lost 2 drone carriers. 0 crew members had died. The galaxy would remember this day forever. The Great Hall of Orion Station was silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence of shock. The silence of a galaxy that had just learned it was not as powerful as it thought. Admiral Tae-ho Kim walked into the chamber with his head held high. Behind him came Diplomatic Officer Yoona Choi, Captain Sok Yoon, and the commanders who had led humanity to victory. Their boots clicked against the crystal floor. The sound echoed in the emptiness. The Coalition representatives sat in their usual places. But everything had changed. The Velthari High Arbiter was there. His silver scales now cracked in 100 places. Stress did that to his species. Fear did that. The Korvax warlord had lost one of his tusks in the battle. He did not speak. The Mirren Hive Mother was silent, her many eyes watching the humans with something close to respect. The other species watched, too. The Dorathi. The Kelvin. The Syrinx. None of them had participated in the attack on Kepler 7. They had waited to see what would happen. Now they knew. Yoona stepped forward. She was the same woman who had stood in this hall days ago, alone against the mockery of 12 species. Now she stood as the voice of a people who had proven themselves. The Kepler expanse belongs to humanity, she said. Her voice was calm but firm. This is no longer a question. This is a fact. The High Arbiter tried to speak. His voice came out as a broken whisper. Your fleet was so small. We had numbers. We had power. We had 10,000 years of conquest behind us. Yoona looked at him with steady eyes. And we had something you forgot to consider. We had desperation. We had creativity. We had the experience of a species that has never had the luxury of being the strongest. She walked closer to the council table. Every alien in the room watched her. Some with fear. Some with curiosity. A few with something that might have been admiration. Let me tell you about humans, Yoona continued. We come from a small planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Our world tried to kill us from the moment we were born. Ice ages froze our ancestors. Droughts starved them. Predators hunted them. Disease struck them down by the millions. She paused, letting the words sink in. We survived all of it, not because we were bigger or stronger or faster. We survived because we refused to die. We looked at every obstacle and found a way around it, through it, or over it. When we could not fight, we ran. When we could not run, we hid. When we could not hide, we fought with everything we had. Admiral Tae-ho stepped forward to join her. His voice was deeper, harder. It was the voice of a man who had just won an impossible war. You measured us by our size, he said. By our numbers. By the power of our reactors and the thickness of our armor. You looked at 12 ships and saw weakness. He let the silence stretch for a moment. You should have looked at what was inside those ships. You should have looked at the people, at the minds, at the hearts. You should have asked yourselves why a species so young and so small would dare to stand against you. The Korvax warlord finally spoke. His voice was rough with pain and something else. Humility. What do you want from us? Surrender? Tribute? Territory? Tae-ho shook his head. We are not you. We do not want to conquer. We do not want to rule. We just want to live. To build our colonies. To raise our children. To explore the stars. Yoona nodded. All we ask is that you leave us in peace. The Kepler expanse is ours. Any challenge to that will be met with the same response you saw today." She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. And now you know what that response looks like. The meeting ended not with agreements or treaties or formal declarations. It ended with the coalition representatives leaving in silence. They had come to bury humanity. They left, knowing that humanity had buried them instead. In the days that followed, word spread across the galaxy. The Battle of Kepler 7 became legend. Stories grew and changed as they passed from species to species. Some said the human fleet had been 100 ships, not 12. Others said the humans had used magic, not technology. A few claimed the humans were not mortal at all, but demons, from some dark corner of the universe. The truth was more simple and more terrifying. Humans were exactly what they appeared to be: small, fragile creatures with short lives and weak bodies. But inside those bodies lived minds that never stopped thinking, hearts that never stopped fighting, and souls that never accepted defeat. The coalition added a new entry to their species database. It was short, but every word was important. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Third planet, from the star called Sol. Threat assessment. Extreme. Special notes. Do not engage without overwhelming force. Do not underestimate their technology. Do not assume that size or numbers will guarantee victory. Humans do not fight fair. They fight to win. At the bottom, someone added a final warning. It was passed from commander to commander. Taught in every military academy. Whispered in every war room. They are small. They are young. They are mortal. And they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. On Kepler 7, the colony celebrated. 30,000 people who had expected to die were still alive. They lit fires and sang songs, and held their children close. They did not fully understand what had happened in the darkness between the stars. They only knew that they were safe. Admiral Tejo did not join the celebration. He stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, looking out at the stars. Captain Sok stood beside him. "We won," Sok said quietly. "Why do you look so troubled?" Tejo was silent for a long moment. "We showed them what we can do. Now every species in the galaxy knows. Some will fear us. Some will respect us. And some will want to destroy us before we grow any stronger. Let them try." Tejo turned to look at his old friend. "They will. This is only the beginning, Sok. Today we proved that humans cannot be dismissed. Tomorrow, we will have to prove that we cannot be defeated." Siok smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when the aliens first laughed at their fleet. "Then we will prove it. Every time they challenge us, every time they doubt us, we will show them what we are." He looked out at the stars, at the infinite darkness that held both danger and wonder. "We are human. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. And we never, ever give up." Tejo finally allowed himself a small smile. He thought of his daughter back on Earth. He thought of his promise to return. He would keep that promise. And he would make sure that she grew up in a galaxy where humans were not prey, but equals. Where the laughter of their enemies turned to silence. And then to respect. The tiny fleet had done the impossible. Now it was time to build something greater. The stars waited, and humanity was ready.